November 1943. Night over the Central Pacific. A Japanese veteran bomber pilot looks down and sees nothing. No city glow, no flares, no searchlights. No ship wakes bright enough to matter. Below him, the ocean is a sealed black sheet. Ahead of him, the sky seems empty too. Then tracer fire rises out of the dark, from exactly the right place. A fighter appears where no fighter should have been, and for the first time in the war, a man who has survived China, the South Seas, and the long attritional months over the Solomons, feels a thought he does not want. What if the eyes are now the least reliable instrument in the cockpit? He has trusted them for years. Japanese naval aviators are trained in a culture that worships visual certainty. Spot first, turn first, strike first. Find the glint of metal before the other man sees yours. Judge angle, speed, distance, sun, cloud, horizon. The best men can feel a fight forming before it fully appears. In the opening months of the war, that kind of sight feels almost supernatural. Over China, over Pearl Harbor, over the Philippines, it works. A veteran pilot learns to trust what he sees, because what he sees keeps becoming true. That habit will become a problem. At the beginning, vision is almost an empire. The zero turns inside most opponents. Japanese scouting is aggressive. Night surface forces move with confidence. Pilots and lookouts still believe enough training and enough nerve can master darkness, cloud, and sea. The war feels human-sized then. A sharp eye can still seem bigger than a machine. A skilled pilot can still believe the next fight belongs to the man who reads the sky best. For a while, he is right. Then America begins changing the war in ways the eye cannot track fast enough. The change does not arrive in one package. It arrives as camouflage first, then as false radio traffic, then as radar, then as fighter direction, then as crossing tactics that make a visual attack solution expire in mid-dive, then as night fighters that climb toward bombers without showing a light, then as fleets that seem absent until they are not, then as islands that look silent by day and attack by dusk. By the time Japanese veterans begin describing the Pacific as a place full of ghosts, they are not talking about superstition, they are talking about a battlefield that has stopped presenting itself honestly. The first clue comes early, and it is easy to underestimate. Pearl Harbor had rewarded sight and surprise. Japanese aviators crossed open water, found their objective, struck what they could see, and vanished into success. The lesson seemed obvious. Bold reconnaissance, disciplined flying, and visual coordination could humiliate even a powerful enemy. Why would a veteran doubt such a lesson? Because lessons earned in the first act of a war often become traps in the second. The Pacific is about to turn into a place where what you see is often only the surface of what is already moving under you. At Midway, the Americans begin proving that first. Not theatrically. Not in a way every Japanese pilot understands at once. More quietly. American codebreakers have already pierced enough of the Japanese plan to know where the blow is coming. Midway itself sends a false message about a water shortage. Japanese intelligence confirms it. A truth is manufactured and then returned to its owner, wearing a disguise. No pilot in the sky can see that deception. But men will die inside it anyway. So what does a veteran trust more? The horizon or the plan behind the horizon? June 4th, 1942. Japanese strike aircraft approach Midway, expecting the usual sequence. Find target, hit target, return. The island should behave like an island. The American response should unfold inside known limits. Yet before the first bombs fall, radar has already widened the American field of vision. Aircraft are being tracked far beyond the range of a lookout's naked eye. Controllers are starting to shape the defense before Japanese crews believe they have been properly seen. For a Japanese pilot, the result is unnerving even before it becomes lethal. The enemy seems ready too soon. The timing feels wrong. A radar operator on Midway does not look heroic. He is in a room with equipment, voices, bearings, distances, altitudes, and a kind of pressure that does not leave smoke trails behind it. 5 minutes after one enemy formation is first sighted visually, radar confirms it at roughly 93 miles. Long before Japanese aviators can make out defensive fighters clearly, someone on the island is already building their arrival into a picture. The Pacific is changing from a war of sight to a war of systems. Japanese veterans will feel that shift long before they can fully explain it. The old world says danger begins when you see it. Radar says danger begins long before that. A Japanese pilot descending toward Midway cannot see the room where Americans are measuring him. He cannot see the pencil marks. He cannot hear the instructions going out to defending fighters. He only notices that opposition appears with suspicious timing. The island seems to know too much too early. He files that sensation away, not as fear, as irritation. War often begins with irritation before it matures into dread. Then comes the second insult. The Americans do not merely spot earlier, they fight differently once they arrive. John Thatch has already spent evenings moving kitchen matches across a table, thinking about a problem Japanese pilots do not yet know they have created for themselves. The Zero is better in the climb, better in the turn. Fine, then stop giving it the kind of fight where those advantages pay cleanly. Thatch is not looking for beauty. He is looking for a way to make what a Japanese pilot sees become false before the trigger breaks. The first time a Japanese veteran sees the crossing defense work properly, it feels like betrayal by his own instincts. One wildcat appears exposed. The stern attack builds cleanly. The angle is right. The closure is right. The American should break in panic and offer the familiar curve. Instead, both fighters turn inward, not away, inward. For a split second it looks absurd. Then the second fighter crosses behind the first and opens fire. Nothing supernatural has happened. Yet the attacking pilot feels as if the sky itself has misreported the scene. This is one of the first moments Japanese veterans begin losing faith in visual certainty. They still trust their skill. They still trust the Zero. They still trust attack geometry. But now geometry itself is being manipulated. One target becomes two. One easy stern shot becomes a trap. The eye sees exposure. The tactic reveals connection. A veteran starts learning a dangerous new lesson. Sometimes the problem is not that you saw too little. Sometimes you saw exactly enough to be deceived. The Wildcat contributes to this deception by being the wrong shape. It is not sleek. It is not graceful. It looks slower because it is slower in many conditions, somewhere around 328 to 333 miles per hour, depending on altitude and model. Its climb is weaker than the Zero's. It carries weight in armor, in fuel protection, in solid construction. That bulk makes it look vulnerable in the wrong kind of fight. Japanese pilots see heaviness and read weakness. Thatch sees heaviness and asks whether it can buy one more second. Those are very different readings of the same aircraft. A pilot in a Zero begins to understand the real trap. The Wildcat is not pretending to be agile. It is pretending to be alone. That is much more dangerous. The heavy Grumman can absorb the stress of the approach, hold steady a moment longer than expected, and survive just long enough for the partner's guns to matter. A Japanese veteran who has built his life on reading the enemy's body language in the air now discovers body language can be rehearsed. The American is not panicking, he is waiting. At first, that realization does not spread evenly. Some Japanese pilots dismiss it as a trick. Some blame carelessness. Some adapt faster than others. Combat always sorts men differently. But once enough veterans have the same experience, a small poison enters the ready room. A second glance. Where is the other fighter? Is the first target bait? If I stay on this tail another half second, whose guns am I actually flying into? A second glance sounds cheap. At 300 miles per hour, it is expensive. Then Guadalcanal deepens the problem. Henderson Field is not just an airstrip. It is a stubborn argument with appearances. Palm fronds, revetments, dispersed aircraft, camouflage, improvised concealment, damaged planes repaired and returned, fuel dumps hidden, positions masked. Japanese bombers and pilots strike what looks vulnerable, and again, they discover the island is harder to read than it should be. Parts of the field seem dead, then fighters rise from it. Bomb craters still smoke, then aircraft taxi again. What exactly has been destroyed? A Japanese reconnaissance pilot passes over Henderson and sees an airfield that looks battered enough to matter. Burned patches, strips of exposed earth. Fragments of activity, but not the kind that should support the rate of resistance the Americans keep showing. Reports go back. Damage assessments take shape. They sound reasonable. Then the next raid meets American fighters again. The report was not false exactly. It was incomplete in the most lethal way. That distinction will haunt Pacific scouting again and again. On the ground, an American Marine drags palm fronds over a revetment and thinks about shade, not legend. He is not performing for history. He is trying to keep a Japanese pilot from understanding the airfield in one pass. Nearby, a mechanic works on an engine under concealment that makes the aircraft look less like an aircraft and more like a patch of ruined tropical earth. The work is crude, practical, repetitive. Good camouflage often looks like nothing at all. That is its power. If the enemy's eye lands and moves on, the deception has already succeeded. Japanese veterans over Guadalcanal begin noticing another change. The Americans are no longer simply hiding objects, they are hiding rhythm. Fighters that should not have been ready are ready. Airfields that look suppressed are active. Logistics that appear broken are somehow functioning. The visual battlefield says one thing, the operational battlefield says another. A pilot may report what he honestly sees and still mislead his own side because the meaning of the scene has been altered before he arrives. He can still trust his sight. He just can no longer trust sight by itself. Night makes all of this worse. Japanese naval officers had entered the war with a real tradition of night fighting. Long-lance torpedoes, aggressive destroyer runs, confidence in darkness, sharp lookouts. The first months reward some of that confidence. Off Savo Island, Allied forces paid terribly for their own blindness. It would have been easy then to conclude that the night still belonged to the side with the nerve to enter it first. Easy. Wrong. Because American radar keeps learning. Not perfectly. Not cleanly. Not in a straight line. There are painful failures. Misread plots. Poor coordination, inexperience, confusion. Yet the machinery improves under pressure. Ship after ship, operation after operation. Officers and crews start discovering what radar can do when it is trusted, trained, and tied to gunnery or fighter direction, instead of treated as an interesting accessory. Night stops being pure darkness. It becomes a layer. A Japanese veteran can see that something has changed before he understands how complete the change will become. November 1942. Off Guadalcanal. Admiral Willis Lee's force enters a night battle with radar as part of its sight. The Japanese still possess experience and courage in the dark, but the Americans are beginning to place shells using information no lookout can provide. A ship can now be tracked before it is clearly seen. Bearings can harden before the horizon confesses anything. For a Japanese sailor or officer raised on the old night grammar, this is deeply unsettling. The enemy is firing with confidence before the darkness has been properly opened. How? One Japanese destroyer lookout peers through spray and blackness and finds himself in a world where the old sequence no longer works. First you glimpse, then you identify, then you commit. That sequence is being broken. American ships are reacting before identification feels complete. Gunfire arrives from what seems like patience without eyes. Veterans start muttering less about skill and more about hidden instruments. Darkness is no longer protecting the man who understands it best. It is protecting the man who can see through it without looking. The war at sea teaches the same lesson the air war has started teaching above it. Eyes are now only one node in the chain. A Japanese veteran pilot can still outread a young American in a turning fight and yet lose because an unseen controller placed that American higher, earlier, and closer than expected. A Japanese destroyer captain can still trust his lookouts and lose because the enemy's plot room has already built the contact. A bomber crew can still rely on darkness and find a night fighter climbing toward them through information instead of moonlight. Skill remains. Privacy does not. Then deception adds another layer. By 1943 and 1944, both sides are camouflaging aggressively, but Japanese veterans are increasingly forced to confront American deception as an ecosystem rather than a trick. Smoke screens, dispersed assets, false radio impressions, operational feints, hidden assembly points, carriers where they should not be, airfields that seem weak until the last moment, surface groups that appear to be in one place while the decisive danger grows elsewhere. The battlefield is becoming a liar, not always, just often enough to alter instinct. A Japanese staff officer stares at a map with two truths on it. The first truth is visual. reported sightings. Smoke observed, number of aircraft seen, damage estimated, shipping counted. The second truth is operational. Timelines, fuel states, intercepts, patterns, possibilities, enemy habits, missing pieces. The trouble is, the first truth looks more solid. The eye gives confidence. The larger picture gives doubt. More and more often, the doubt turns out to be wiser than the confident report. Even friendly deception contributes to the corrosion. Japanese carriers themselves use camouflage. Flight decks are painted. Silhouettes are manipulated. Ships attempt to appear as something other than what they are to hostile eyes above them. A veteran pilot looking down at his own Navy's efforts understands the implication at once, even if he does not say it out loud. If we are trying to fool their eyes, why do we keep assuming ours cannot be fooled in return? The question is simple. The answer is not pleasant. Another American innovation deepens the crisis. Fighter direction. The old pilot's world says a dogfight begins when two men find each other in the sky. The new Pacific says the fight may have begun 10 minutes earlier in a radar room, on a plotting board, or over a headset. Bearings are called, altitudes are judged, fighters are steered. The pilot arrives in the right square of sky, already carrying the work of unseen people. A Japanese veteran is still reading aircraft. The Americans are reading the whole volume around the aircraft. One of these ways of seeing is much harder to defeat. A US Navy talker repeats a vector with the calm of a man who knows panic over the microphone can kill strangers. He is not in the cockpit. He will never feel the stick tremble under combat load. Yet somewhere ahead, a fighter pilot is trusting his voice more than the darkness outside the canopy. Radar contact. Bearing. Altitude. Turn 2 points. Hold. Now climb. The Japanese crew inbound toward the task force cannot hear any of this. They only discover its existence when an interception happens too neatly to feel accidental. The emptiness ahead was not empty. It was prepared. For Japanese veterans, this is where distrust becomes more intimate. A pilot can accept that the enemy has good equipment. He can even respect it. What really shakes him is the feeling that his own body is delivering obsolete information. His eyes tell him the ocean is empty. His enemy behaves as if every mile has already been measured. His eyes tell him one wildcat is alone. The second American fighter proves otherwise. His eyes tell him darkness is cover. A radar-guided night fighter climbs into firing range. The body keeps reporting. The war keeps overruling the report. Some of the most important American contributions to this invisible war are mundane. An armorer feeding belts into a fighter's wings. A deck crewman locking folding wings into place. A mechanic returning a damaged aircraft to service behind camouflage. A radar plotter keeping bearings clean. A controller choosing which section to send. An instructor repeating the same lesson until it becomes boring enough to survive panic. Japanese veterans are not simply facing aircraft or ships. They are facing a thickening net of ordinary competence. Ordinary competence is often the most frightening thing in war, because once a system becomes ordinary, it becomes repeatable. One lucky deception can be dismissed. Two can be blamed on weather. A string of them forces a veteran to alter his instincts. Repetition is what finally does the damage. Another hidden airfield. Another fighter section placed too perfectly. Another strike that hits a point assumed to be safe. Another night where darkness does not protect anyone for long. At some point, a veteran stops saying, "How did that happen?" He starts saying, "Where is the part I am not seeing?" That question changes everything. The Great Marianas campaign exposes the new balance brutally. By 1944, Japanese naval aviation is carrying terrible strain. Veteran losses have thinned the core. Replacement training has degraded. American radar, fighter direction, carrier operations, and aircraft quality have all leapt forward. The result is not merely tactical defeat, it is cognitive overload. Japanese pilots enter a battle where the old reliance on visual aggression no longer compensates for the hidden structure on the other side. A young pilot may still see a target. A veteran sees the trap around the target. That is worse. American radar picks up incoming raids well before the Japanese can shape the final attack cleanly. Controllers direct Hellcats into position. Pilots climb into battle, already advantaged by information the enemy cannot see. To the Japanese side, the interception can feel almost unfairly prompt. Squadrons seem to materialize in the right place with suspicious regularity. No magic is involved, only preparation. But preparation that cannot be seen in the sky often feels like magic to the man flying into it. A Japanese aviator in June 1944 might still trust his eyes enough to know when a fighter is diving at him. Too late. The earlier trust is what has collapsed. He no longer trusts the open patch of sky before the dive begins. He no longer trusts empty bearings reported moments earlier. He no longer trusts visual gaps between American formations. He no longer assumes darkness, cloud, or distance are neutral territory. Every absence begins to look suspicious. This is what deception and radar together have done. They have weaponized emptiness. Consider how humiliating that is for a veteran. He trained to master visible details, reflection off a canopy, tiny shifts in angle, shape against cloud, wake pattern below, smoke drift above. Suddenly the decisive danger is coming from what is not visible yet. The invisible has become organized. Worse, it has become American. A man can fight another man. How does he fight an absence that already knows where he is? Not all the answers come from machines. Some come from doctrine. Thax Weave is one example. Night fighter control is another. Radar-directed interception grows sharper. Cross-checking scout reports with non-visual intelligence becomes more common. Camouflage is tied to timing, not merely paint and palm leaves. Deception is made operational rather than ornamental. The Americans stop treating concealment as a static trick and start treating it as a living component of battle rhythm. That is why Japanese veterans feel hunted by patterns rather than stunts. Patterns are harder to forget. A Japanese bomber navigator marks a course over black water and feels confident because the mathematics are right. Wind estimated, heading checked, timing good. Visual references sparse but manageable. Somewhere below, the American force should still be unseen, or at least insufficiently alert. He is doing his part correctly. Then anti-aircraft fire begins from a sector that should not yet be organized. Searchlights stab elsewhere. Fighters arrive from an angle that feels prearranged. The calculations were sound. The world they described was wrong. In another corner of the war, dummy objects do their work quietly. Dummy aircraft, dummy installations, false concentrations, dispersed real assets hidden among ruined or unimportant ones. Decoys do not need to fool every observer forever. They only need to waste time, divert bombs, or distort a pilot's confidence long enough for the real shape of the battlefield to remain concealed. A veteran learns the hardest lesson here. Even accurate vision can be wasted vision if it lands on the wrong object. You can see perfectly and still be useless. One Japanese reconnaissance crew returns with photographs that seem straightforward. Objects on the ground, aircraft count, visible damage, revetted positions, a few probable decoys perhaps, but not enough to restructure the whole assessment. The men did not imagine anything. They captured what was there. The problem is what was there was staged, not entirely false, curated. And curated reality is often deadlier than pure illusion because it asks to be trusted. American night fighting drives the point deeper. Once airborne radar and ship-directed night fighter control mature, darkness changes citizenship. It no longer belongs by default to the side willing to risk it. A Japanese crew slipping through black Pacific air now has to wonder whether the darkness is actually an American screen behind which controllers are already measuring range and angle. The old comfort of invisibility drains away. Veterans who once treated night as a friend begin treating it as a room the enemy may already be inside. On November 13, 1943, a Marine night fighter makes a ship-directed kill at night, part of a larger change that will spread quickly. Such events matter beyond the individual shoot-down. They send a message through surviving crews. The Americans are no longer merely enduring darkness, they are using it. Once that truth hardens, Japanese veterans start re-evaluating every previous confidence. Cloud cover, moonless approaches, low visibility, long range over water. All of it now feels contaminated by possibility. A veteran pilot says very little after one such mission. He removes his gloves slowly, stares at the table, and says only, "There was no light, no searchlight, no beacon, no flare path, no visible warning, just the feeling that an unseen chain had found him, fixed him, and handed him to a fighter." The younger men in the room wait for a technical explanation. He does not have one neat enough to satisfy them. He only knows what matters. His eyes were working. They were not enough. The Pacific is becoming crowded with hidden intermediaries. Codebreakers no pilot sees. Radar sets no scout can photograph clearly enough to neutralize in time. Controllers whose voices shape interceptions. Mechanics whose camouflage keeps damaged strength looking destroyed. Deck crews whose efficiency turns carriers into moving ambushes. Instructors who drill mutual support until it overrides panic. What Japanese veterans stop trusting is not eyesight in the simple sense. They stop trusting the idea that eyesight alone grants command of the battle. That belief dies hard. Even in daylight, the old confidence has started fraying. A veteran sees open water and wonders about radar range, sees scattered aircraft and wonders which are real, sees a damaged field and wonders what remains hidden, sees one fighter and wonders where the second is, sees darkness coming and wonders whether darkness is now just another American tool. The eye still gathers facts. It no longer rules them. That is a profound demotion for men trained in visual mastery. American camouflage on islands becomes more sophisticated because it is tied to patience. Not every gun position fires immediately. Not every aircraft is exposed when operational. Not every installation wants to look alive. The point is not only to hide things. The point is to shape Japanese interpretation. A field that looks weaker than it is may pull a strike into bad timing. A quiet strip may lure reconnaissance into undercounting strength. A damaged sector may conceal a surviving nerve center. Deception works best when the enemy collaborates by completing the story himself. Veterans hate that kind of trap. A Japanese staff pilot studies after-action reports and begins seeing a pattern he dislikes. The Americans keep turning partial truth into strategic effect. A carrier is really there, but not where expected. An airfield is really damaged, but not crippled. A fighter is really vulnerable, but not alone. A night sector is really dark, but not unobserved. A force really retreats, but into a better ambush. Nothing is entirely false. Everything is arranged. He understands the danger now. Arrangement is harder to bomb than an object. This is why veterans become so cautious with first impressions. A young pilot may still trust the obvious target, the clear approach lane, the momentary gap in enemy coverage. A veteran starts doubting surfaces. He asks what sits behind the scene, beneath it, or just outside it. He becomes less likely to chase the first answer because he has survived too many second answers. That caution can save him. It can also slow him. War punishes both gullibility and hesitation. The Pacific is forcing Japanese veterans to choose which wound they prefer. One American instructor stands beside a chalkboard and simplifies the new world for fresh pilots. If they can see one of you, he says, make sure they are really seeing two. It sounds like a line about fighter tactics. It is larger than that. The Americans are building an entire war around the idea that what the enemy sees should never equal what the enemy gets. Camouflage, radar direction, feints, layered defense, timing, dummy objects, radio deception, mutual support, night control. The enemy's eyes become the opening you attack. A Japanese veteran, somewhere after the Marianas, realizes he no longer believes empty sky. That is a terrible sentence for a pilot to think. He still believes in altitude, fuel, weather, machine performance, training. He has not turned mystical. Quite the opposite. He has become painfully practical. Empty sky now means unconfirmed sky. Darkness means unconfirmed darkness. A damaged target means unconfirmed damage. A lone aircraft means unconfirmed solitude. The war has not blinded him. It has made him suspicious. Suspicion is heavier than confidence. The old world produced attack pilots who moved quickly because they trusted the first clean reading. The new Pacific punishes first clean readings. One fraction too early in the dive, and the crossing fighter appears. One misread dark patch on the sea, and radar-guided guns open. One assumption about an airfield's condition, and hidden aircraft rise. One belief that visual cover remains yours, and a night fighter finds you anyway. A veteran still moves. He just moves carrying doubt. That weight changes his war. Around Leyte and the later carrier battles, deception grows broader and harsher. Large forces maneuver with feints layered over genuine movements. Decoy carrier groups can exist as bait. Real striking power can wait elsewhere. Visual contact does not guarantee strategic meaning. A fleet on the horizon may be exactly what it looks like, and still not be the thing that matters most. Naval veterans understand the humiliation of that immediately. A sighting once felt like possession. Now a sighting may only be bait. The Japanese side has used deception too, of course. Every serious navy does. Every serious air force does. That is part of the bitter education. Veterans know how often they themselves have tried to mislead enemy scouts, disguise decks, disperse aircraft, or exploit darkness. They understand perfectly well that battle has always contained lies. What changes in the Pacific is scale and integration. The Americans begin combining lies with sensors, controllers, logistics, and doctrine so efficiently that the deception no longer feels occasional, it feels infrastructural. That is much harder to live with. A mechanic on an American island base watches Japanese bombs strike a decoy area and says nothing. Nearby, the real aircraft remain concealed long enough to matter. The men will not brag about this later, as if it were a cinematic masterpiece. They will simply note that the enemy spent explosives and attention on the wrong patch of Earth. Enough of those small successes accumulate, and an island keeps breathing when it should have been strangled. Deception is often measured in what survives quietly. Quiet survival can break an enemy's confidence more effectively than visible defiance. A veteran Japanese scout overflies another target and finds himself talking back to his own senses. Too neat, too obvious, too quiet, too exposed. Not enough movement, too much movement. He is still collecting data. He is still disciplined, yet the dialogue inside his head has changed. The old confidence that observation naturally leads to understanding is gone. Observation now leads first to suspicion. He has become a better analyst. He has become a less peaceful pilot. American success in this hidden war comes partly from humility. They stop insisting the enemy must be met on enemy terms. They stop assuming the eye alone is king. They put faith in radar, even while still learning its limits. They accept that a room full of operators and controllers may matter as much as the glamorous man at the controls. They embrace camouflage that looks unheroic, decoys that look cheap, and tactics that ask one pilot to trust another, rather than chase his own legend. Nothing in that is romantic. Much of it is fatal to opponents. A Japanese veteran sees through some deceptions now. That should be said clearly. He is not helpless. He notices unusual spacing. He grows alert to suspiciously easy targets. He learns to distrust dark water around American task forces. He becomes less willing to assume a battered airfield is a dead airfield. Veterans adapt when they can. Some become frighteningly cautious, and caution itself can preserve life. Yet adaptation has a cost. The more questions a pilot must ask before committing, the more initiative leaks away. The Americans are not only hiding, they are making hesitation expensive. In a briefing room, a Japanese officer warns younger crews not to treat first sightings as conclusions. The advice is correct. It is also tragic. Correct, because it reflects the changed war. Tragic, because it attacks the confidence that made Japanese early war aviation so dangerous. Fast decisions once won battles. Now some of those same fast decisions run headlong into radar, mutual support, and arranged emptiness. The officer is not merely teaching caution. He is teaching men to distrust the instincts their institution once celebrated. That kind of transition is never clean. Night over the Pacific again. A bomber crew sees only darkness and low cloud. Engines drone. Instruments glow faintly. Somewhere below, the American fleet should still be vulnerable to surprise. Then a voice in the cockpit changes. Another crewman has glimpsed something. Not a ship, a fighter, briefly, then gone, then back, closer. The crew had been looking down for victims. They forgot to wonder who was looking up for them. That mistake becomes increasingly hard to survive. By the late war, the title explains itself. Japanese veterans stop trusting their own eyes because the war has taught them that the eye is now entering an argument it can no longer win by itself. Vision still matters. Courage still matters. Flying skill still matters. But the battlefield is no longer organized around what the veteran can personally verify from his canopy or bridge. The hidden layer has become decisive. Once a hidden layer becomes decisive, confidence based on sight alone becomes a liability. A final insult remains. The Americans do not merely build this invisible layer. They mass-produce it. Radar sets spread. Fighter direction improves. Carrier coordination sharpens. Camouflage becomes habit. Deception is folded into planning, rather than added as decoration. Air groups arrive carrying tactics shaped by lessons already paid for. Night fighting becomes doctrine instead of experiment. A veteran can cope with one unpleasant surprise. He cannot easily cope with a civilization that keeps manufacturing them. That is the deeper reason his trust collapses. There is a scene late in the war that lives in many forms. A Japanese veteran looks at an apparently clear stretch of sky or sea and does not relax. Younger men may still read emptiness as safety. He does not. He knows better now. He knows emptiness can hide radar coverage, fighter placement, reserve strength, operational timing, false damage, dispersed aircraft, decoys, or a controller's calm voice somewhere far beyond sight. He has learned to fear what has not yet appeared. That is a heavy education, and yet there is something disciplined in this mistrust. It is not superstition, it is respect for complexity. The veteran has been taught by defeat to seek the invisible mechanism behind the visible scene. He has become, in a cruel way, a better reader of war. The trouble is that becoming a better reader does not guarantee victory if the enemy's unreadable layers keep multiplying faster than yours. He is wiser now. The war is less forgiving of wisdom than it once was. A US carrier deck at dusk. Men move with practiced speed. Fighters are refueled, rearmed, inspected, signaled. Somewhere below deck, radar plots continue. Somewhere else, pilots brief. Nothing about the scene looks deceptive at first glance. Yet the entire machine is designed to make tomorrow's first enemy impression unreliable. That is the hidden elegance of the American answer. It does not depend on one dazzling trick. It depends on making unreliability routine. Routine deception is stronger than spectacular deception. A Japanese pilot survived because he doubted a lone American fighter. Another died because he did not doubt quickly enough. A scout filed an honest report that misled command because the target had been staged. A night crew flew into darkness, assuming darkness still belonged to them. A destroyer lookout searched with disciplined eyes, while radar already replaced part of the horizon. Piece by piece, case by case, the same lesson returned. What you see may be real. What it means may already be false. This is why the old veterans sound different when they speak of the later Pacific. Less swagger, more caution, fewer claims of mastery over the visible world, more respect for timing, electronics, camouflage, organization, and trickery, integrated with firepower. They have not become cowards. They have become men who understand that war now contains too many unseen hands to trust the first clean picture. A clean picture can be the beginning of the trap. A messy picture may be closer to truth. No pilot likes learning that. In another age, a veteran's eye had been enough to dominate lesser men. In this age, the veteran's eye is still magnificent, but it is no longer sovereign. That may be the cruelest shift of all, because sovereignty is what early victory had promised him. He would read the sky better than his enemies. He would interpret the sea better than his enemies. He would move first because he would know first. Then came radar. Then came camouflage. Then came deception tied to logistics. Then came tactics designed to falsify the moment of attack. Then came night fighters. A Japanese veteran now checks the obvious and then questions it. He sees a target and wonders about the second target. He sees silence and wonders about hidden readiness. He sees darkness and wonders about unseen instruments. He sees a fleet and wonders whether it is bait. He sees damage and wonders what survived below the surface. This change does not save him from everything. It simply makes him harder to fool in the old, easy way. The Americans have forced him into a more exhausting war. One young replacement asks an older pilot, "When did you stop trusting what you saw?" The veteran does not answer immediately. He thinks of Midway's strange readiness, of Henderson Field breathing under camouflage, of Wildcats turning inward instead of away. of ships firing in black water with too much confidence, of night fighters appearing out of clean darkness, of reports that were accurate and still wrong. Then he says, "When the enemy learned to use what I could not see, nothing more, nothing needed." That sentence reaches farther than aviation. It explains the entire Pacific transformation. The Americans had always possessed strength in industry, engineering, and adaptation. Over time, they began knitting those strengths together into battle methods that made sight alone inadequate. The Japanese began the war with sharper visual aggressiveness and great tactical excellence in several fields. But as the war thickened with hidden systems, the side better able to integrate invisible advantages started changing the meaning of every visible encounter. The veteran was not losing his eyesight. He was losing the old world that eyesight had ruled. Even the strongest title lines usually hide something simpler underneath. Why did Japanese veterans stop trusting their own eyes? Because their eyes kept delivering the scene while America increasingly controlled the context. A lone fighter scene, but not actually lone. A damaged field scene, but not actually finished. A dark approach scene, but not actually unwatched. A fleet scene, but not actually decisive. The eye remained honest. The battlefield stopped being honest back. There is no melodrama in that. Only fatigue. Fatigue from having to doubt the obvious. Fatigue from carrying caution into every attack. Fatigue from discovering that experience, while still precious, no longer solves the whole problem. Veterans could still outfly younger men. They could still spot subtle things. They could still survive by distrusting easy answers. Yet many of them were now fighting inside an environment whose most dangerous truths were assembled beyond sight. That is what made the Pacific feel haunted by the end. Not ghosts, hidden order. The Americans earned that hidden order slowly, through painful experiments with radar, through fighter direction schools, through deck routines, through code work, through camouflage details no camera celebrates, through instructors who taught men to mistrust the obvious target, through doctrines that made one fighter appear vulnerable while another waited, through night squadrons that learned how to climb toward darkness as if darkness had edges. The result did not look mystical from the American side. It looked like work, very good work. From the Japanese side, it looked like the world had become slippery. That is the word veterans might have used if pressed. Slippery. Targets changed meaning. Silence changed meaning. Distance changed meaning. Weather changed meaning. Darkness changed meaning. Even success sometimes changed meaning, because damage observed was no longer proof of paralysis. The enemy could absorb, hide, repair, redirect, and return before visual logic felt ready to permit it. A veteran could still trust his eyes to report. He could not trust war to behave according to the report. So the title is not really about blindness. It is about betrayal. Not betrayal by the body, but betrayal by the battlefield. The veteran sees what is in front of him and discovers again and again that what is in front of him has been staged, supported, measured, or connected in ways hidden from sight. He starts questioning surfaces because surfaces have become weaponized against him. That is a sophisticated enemy achievement. Make the other man doubt not his courage, not his aircraft, not even his training first. Make him doubt his first impression. Everything after that gets heavier. And once first impressions get heavier, reaction slows. Initiative leaks. Attack geometry becomes less pure. Ready room confidence develops cracks. Young pilots inherit caution instead of swagger. Veterans speak in warnings instead of certainties. A culture built on visual aggression begins teaching defensive skepticism to its own rising men. Nothing about that shift is small. It marks the point where a war has begun re-educating the losing side from the inside. By the end, Japanese veterans are no longer asking only what they see, they are asking what sees them. That is the real transformation. Once a pilot starts wondering about the unseen observer behind the dark horizon, the hidden radar lobe, the waiting fighter controller, the decoy, the reserve section, the masked airstrip, the staged fleet picture, he is fighting a different war than the one he entered. The Pacific did not simply become more dangerous, it became less legible. And perhaps that is the final cruelty. These veterans were, in many cases, among the finest visual fighting men of their generation. They had earned the right to trust their eyes, They had built careers and victories on that trust. Then history moved beneath them. Technology, doctrine, camouflage, and deception fused into something thicker than eyesight could command. They remained skilled. The battlefield became cunning in a new language. Sometimes, a man is not defeated because he lost his strengths. He is defeated because the world changed the value of them. Night over the Pacific again. A veteran bomber pilot looks down and sees nothing. No wakes, no lights, no obvious carrier shape. Only black water, black sky, and the old instinct telling him emptiness means cover. Then tracers rise. A fighter appears where there was supposed to be no fighter. For a heartbeat, he almost blames his eyes. He should not. His eyes told the truth about the surface. The war was happening underneath it. That is why Japanese veterans stopped trusting their own eyes. Not because they became weak, not because they forgot how to see, because the Pacific became a place where camouflage hid strength, dummy targets absorbed attention, fleets maneuvered behind feints, radar saw beyond the horizon, controllers shaped battle before the first visual contact, fighter tactics turned easy targets into traps, and night attacks no longer belonged to the side willing to fly blind. The eyes still worked. The war had simply learned how to lie to them,